Okay, I think we can get started.
Excellent. Well, my name is Warren Freed. I am the president and founder of Dyspraxia USA. What you're looking at is a neurological disorder caused by neurons in the brain that are not connecting, syncing, and firing. This is a condition that goes way beyond motoric skills. This is a condition that includes memory issues, judgment issues, processing and function delays, senses concern, use of language, and speech. And like I said, it's a range. If you have DCD, developmental coordination disorder within itself, that's a fine and gross motor skill that would be held within OT and PT. The different motoric skills when you get to dyspraxia is oral motor production of speech, but also ocular motor, how my eyes seem to have a sense of depth and space, which would make it difficult like reading a book because my eyes don't see that perception of a 3D object, which would make a computer a lot easier. And within this condition, as you're probably going to see with the student, there's a lot of inconsistencies and good and bad days. The intelligence is there, the retrieval is very difficult. And since everything we do is memorized, not learned, we are very, very strict to patterns and structure. So if one thing goes off, it could ruin our whole day. But the good thing is you can redirect us because we have no short-term memory. So you can put us on a different path and we get obsessed with something because everything we do is built upon an obsession. And the parents had some questions. I think the special education teacher has some questions too. So I'll address these in specifics. One of the questions was confidence in trying new things. With the condition, since our long-term memory is so impeccable and so is our visual memory, if we say we did bad on a spelling test one time, that's our only point of reference. So our mentality is that we're going to fail again and not even to try to make that attempt because we're also perfectionists. Our brains go from 0 to 100. There's no middle ground with it. So we're very, very hard on ourselves, which increases our anxiety, some depression issues, and we might hold back and not want to be engaged. And the bad days impacts these shutdown behaviors. What you see one day is not what you're going to see another day emotionally too. The problem is something like cognitive behavioral role-playing therapy is everything we do needs to be on a script, how to respond and how to react. The problem is the world keeps changing and evolving. We don't know how to keep up that way. So we constantly need to have social role-playing engagement because we might judge an emotion or interpret something so wrong the complete opposite way that if we make ourselves feel so angry and so depressed, it would if someone would clarify the language or the interpretation, we'd feel better about ourselves. And that would be the same thing in an academic. As you know with this child, the intelligence is not impacted, but the interpretation of language or the wordage is impacted. So everything needs to be broke down to a step by step. And if you give us too many steps at one time, we lose it because it takes us roughly 30 seconds to convert short-term into long-term. So it makes it look like we're not paying attention. We're hyper-focusing, but slowly and step by step, where everybody else can do a multitude of things. We can't multitask. And one of the questions as well was some of the best accommodation the teacher can give. Technology is vital for us. Technology allows us to see things in process and give us control, whether it's watching a YouTube video, an instructional video, because if you tell me information, I am not going to be able to keep up and interpret it. If I can record it or I can watch it on video, I have the control issues. Because everything I do needs to be controlled. If I lose that control, I get anxiety. And like I said, these social situations is one of the other questions, the role playing. Because multitasking is not just doing multiple assignments, it's also interacting with more than one person. So we need to engage in that interactive behavior of someone guiding us step by step how to respond. And I wish that teachers understood that this dyspraxia, the condition, also molds into other disorders, because it doesn't come alone. For instance, if my brain doesn't cross the midline, negative and positive numbers can be very challenging. If I don't see in 3 dimensions, geometry is going to be very challenging. If I try to interpret everything very literal, if a train's going 50 miles an hour, that's the only thing I can interpret. My brain is hooked on that situation. But if things are clarified step by step, then I can go with it. And the technology also takes away from some of the physical pain with writing, because we can't judge how much force and how much pressure we're applying. So either I'm writing too light or I'm going through the page, but typing becomes muscle memory through repetition. If I move the page one side or the other, it's like I'm looking at a completely different object. that I'm not even interpreting in that perception. So doing things that way with technology, showing us visual cues so we can engage that and put into our long-term memory is vital. You're going to see, like I said, these inconsistencies. You're going to see the intelligence is there, but the retrieval is going to be challenging. So that's where something like an aid or a scribe is going to be absolutely vital of having that assistance. Because I know what I want to say, but I can't organize myself. So organizing paper, organizing my structure is highly challenging. So I need that constant insistence and repetition in order to progress. So I know there's a lot of teachers around here. I know you guys are all looking at very different specifics. So please ask me specific questions. That's the point of this webinar, and I'll be able to fill in some of these gaps. Because this condition, what you see one day is not what you're going to see the next day. It's so inconsistent that it makes it look like, and this is the challenging bit, that a child's not trying or being lazy, when in fact the child can't control his brain wiring. Whereas I gave you examples of my dyscalculia and dysgraphia, those are pretty consistent. But dyspraxia from one day to another is also impacted upon our emotional stance and our interpretation and all the things in society around us. So please ask questions, and I'll fill in some of these gaps.
I have a question. I'm Margie, I'm the principal. So when he does, when we're trying to give him a task to do, and then that's when he has like a little meltdown, and how do you bring him back to make him feel in a safe place? And do you even ask him to do the task again?
If you ask me to do the task, this is my interpretation and judgment. If you're asking me to do again, my mind says I failed me and I failed you. If you redirect me, go myself into a different situation and then bring me back, I won't even realize why I got upset in the first place. The problem is as well, we're also perfectionists. As you can hear while I speak, I go a million miles an hour. That's how our brain works. So we either go from 0 to 100. Finding those middle grounds and understanding that we learn through mistakes is very challenging because the child might be 7, 8, 9 years in age, but the underdevelopment and immaturity take away 2 or 3 years from that. But the emotional sensitivity, it's like you're speaking to an adult who's highly sensitive and emotional. As you get older, that's excellent. But as you're a child with other peers, that could be perceived as being a baby, too sensitive, too like a crybaby, not being as cool with everyone else. These are the reasons my wife married me, because I had these characteristics. In peer development, these are some of the reasons kids might pick on you and bully you.
Yeah.
Because you're not keeping up to par with your peers and interpreting things in a very intense way, but being so caring. But the problem with that is, since everything we do is memorized, it's easy to take advantage of us. So we can get ourselves into trouble, not on purpose, because we want to be accepted. And we don't know if a situation can get us in trouble until we've had the experience. So our empathy can be used to our disadvantage sometimes in life.
That's great. Other questions?
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
You might have to stand up and
Yeah.
walk up to
Okay.
the mic a little bit.
Like here, is this good?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Hi, I'm MK. I'm the dance teacher. And I want to know, do you have suggestions for me since my class is all movement? We follow a pretty structured format in second grade. Marco will be in second grade. But do you have suggestions?
If you could put things on the floor where he needs to physically stand, where he needs to put his body. Florence Welch is a Grammy-nominated singer who has dyspraxia. That's how she performs. She has things laid on the ground so she knows where to stand. Because I don't know myself within space. If there's a physical object I can touch, I know where it is. If not, that's where I can get in trouble in PE and physical activities, because I don't know how far something is until I hit it. And that could be running into another child, which could be perceived as bullying, which you could see in a fast-paced dance sort of class. But if there's a physical object I can see, like Daniel Radcliffe, he did his plays with dyspraxia, the same mentality. If you can see it, we can perceive it, we can go with it. If you leave it ambiguous, we don't know where it is, we're going to get distracted, we're going to get angry with ourselves, because everything we do, we're mimicking, we're watching others. But others can do things very quick, where us is very slow and step by step. So that guidance floor is strictly pointed. This is where I step. There's a marker, then I know. It doesn't mean I really know how far away it is. It means I know where to step in that situation.
Okay. And do you think breaks during the class are a good idea? Should I ask him if he needs a break? Will he tell me?
Yeah, the breaks for us, because we're working so much faster. So if I'm in a class for an hour, that's like somebody else in a class for 3 hours. So it's very, very intense. That's why what happens you'll see in school day, what you'll see in the morning for the child versus the afternoon is very different, because being in school for 6 hours would be like everybody in this room working 18 hours in a school day. You guys would melt down as well. So we need these breaks over and over again, because we need to constantly regroup and focus. Because we're balls of energy. We have this intensity, but if we're trying to do too much, we will melt down and break down, and then say things that are inappropriate, not because we're angry at you, because we're frustrated because we can't keep up.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Marcos' classroom assistant, and
Sure.
I'm trying to figure out how to keep him organized. I can't keep up with his, his pencils, and now this year he's going to have a desk. So I'm trying to figure out some strategies where I can keep him organized and keep up with his materials, especially his pencils, crayons, and things like that.
Absolutely. Organization is very difficult because I don't know what is or isn't important. So I need something laid out, said, this is your pencil. It's same mentality before, it should be placed here. If you just said, organize your backpack, I don't know how to set that up in structure. If I have visual cues of where things should be placed, the problem is that might be the same thing the next day. So I'm stuck in that rhythm and pattern. But if you don't show me, I can't interpret where things should be placed, because I'm just placing it in a spatial awareness that I don't have. So if you put these visual cues and these structures, then I can follow it. Like if it was like an apple, put the apple here. There's a picture of an apple, I know to put an apple there. But if you just say, put your apple there, where? Where do oh, there's the picture. I can interpret that that's where things need to be placed. Because otherwise we could do things in very strange ways, which you've probably seen. It's not malicious, it's just that we don't have that sense of depth and perception of where things should go. And we don't know what's important and not important. Either it's very important or it isn't. And you can imagine from a young boy's perspective, video games might hold more value than math class. So that's going to be his value of importance. But at the same time, the structure of how things should be, we need an aid and guidance tools for that, because we don't know that value. We can't interpret that value. It's like being married with this condition. My wife will send me separate text messages of what I need to do during that day, and a constant reminder, because something that happened 3 hours ago was really 9 hours ago for me. And I'm trying to focus on one thing, it's hard to redirect it back to something else. But with pictures and technology, I can keep up because it shows me the importance.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another question. So what can you expect in math versus language arts as far as behaviors? I know you touched a little bit on that. Is language arts easier and math is much harder because, or what?
Sure. Everyone with dyspraxia has different comorbidities. That's the problem too. It brings in different conditions associated with it. Nobody has the same things. For something like mathematics, multiplication tables are a pattern. Everything we do is a pattern. Negative and positive numbers are not a pattern. That's where the problem lays. So if it's not patterned and structured or routine, we can't figure it out. But the thing is, we have an amazing visual memory that I can bring forth examinations from before. The problem is, if I did it wrong the first time, that's the only interpretation I'm going to have. I still have people telling me on Facebook that I was the best in mathematics and I only got to 5th grade. Because that's when all the patterns started to break, and there was spatial orientation, there were negative and positive. They're interpreting signs and things I didn't understand. And as far as English language and writing essays, if the child or adult's not impacted orally like I am, I'm very good with my sense of speech. I can tell you what I want to say. I need someone to organize it for me. It's the same mentality of not going first, second, third. I've written essays with a conclusion first. It was beautiful, but it made no sense. If somebody would have taken my information and said, wait a minute, this is this, you get an A. Because the problem is, something like history, the facts won't change. You want me to write a historical essay, I'm failing the class. I still have the same level of intelligence.
Hello, it's me, Christina.
I see it.
My question was similar to Ms. Guillory's, who's Marcos' aide. As far as organization, he's going to be switching classrooms this year, and I'm kind of at a loss. I don't know how to help him in that
Because
way.
you can't memorize time. I don't have a countdown clock in my head. It makes it very challenging. If I have a sand timer, a digital clock, that will show me so I can interpret what's 5 minutes, what's 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Because it's oblivious. Time and space don't hold value. I said to my wife, I saw our in-laws last week and it was 3-4 months ago. I have no idea. Time does not hold this value. So if you could show me what time actually is, then I know how much time I have to get to the class. The problem is, with many classes, I am going to get lost. But I can study a diagram and put that in my visual memory of where the classes are, so I can interpret it. That's how I get around. I study Google Maps. I pretend I'm the man walking to 2 dimensions. That's how I figure out getting around the city. But if it's not that way, if it's not set up in these patterns and structures, I'm going to be late to class, and it might seem like I'm goofing off or not trying or I'm anxious to be there. I just don't know how to sense the time. But if you show me something digital, something I can interpret, then I can go with it.
Thank you.
Anybody else? So what's the biggest piece of advice for a 7-year-old boy going into 2nd grade? What's the biggest, thinking back in your own time, and what's our biggest piece of advice that you can give all of us? All of us in this room at some point are going to be working with Marco.
Okay, the interesting thing with this condition, we're highly in tuned, but also underdeveloped. So he's 7, but really 4, but really 30 at the same time.
Okay.
He's starting to connect the pieces now. He has to realize, and you guys will realize as well as I explain things, it's inconsistent. There are good and bad days. It's not him being lazy or not trying. It's him not being able to retrieve that information, because we are so sensitive and literal. If you say, oh, you weren't trying, I'll never try again. I will shut down. I will hate you. I will not want to speak to you again. You're like, okay, maybe you're having a bad, yes, I am having a bad day. But it's very hard when you're 4 years old to explain that. So it's a very challenging situation of go with these mistakes, because he's only going to learn from them. He's going to memorize and see how these things interpret and work. Because if you look at it, him like him being late to class is him goofing off, or having good and bad days is being lazy, then he's going to be down on himself. And this anxiety piece that we all have is because we need to control everything, which brings in manipulation, which can make us seem like I'm not the best person, but it's the way we can control things. So we have a very thin line between anxiety and depression here. So we understand that he can make mistakes and it's inconsistent, and there are good and bad days, and it's not him doing it maliciously, that's okay. But if you look at it as him not trying or doing things because he's a 7-year-old who just doesn't want to participate, that's the opposite. Because he's a perfectionist who wants to do the best.
So don't you turn the negative words into positive words to get him to do something.
Everything we do starts from a negative because it doesn't come naturally.
Right.
So we have to build from a negative into a positive. So we see it over and over again. It becomes part of our repetition and routine. That's okay. And he's going to learn. And it's going to be really challenging when you're a perfectionist, that you're going to be constantly making mistakes. And since he's in tune with his peers, he's going to see what other kids are doing. And he needs to understand the emotionality that it's okay if I make these mistakes. And the teachers are not going to be angry at me if I one day forgot to put my name on the paper. It's not that I'm doing it, because to be mean. I literally forgot. My brain's going so fast, I'm somewhere else. So if that's okay and you roll with it, then he'll be able to roll with you and not look at Tim's paper and he did this. It's okay if I go slower. That's not a big deal, because society makes with this condition that you feel rushed. So if I go to Walgreens, I'll start throwing everything in my bag and I'll turn around and there's no one behind me. Because I feel like everyone is going so much faster because I have to keep up. But if you understand with his examinations and all his work, it's going to take him longer. It might take him 3 times longer, but that's okay. Because he's a very intelligent child who just needs to take things at a much slower step-by-step pace.
So, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sure.
So, for example, over the summer I've been working on math worksheets with him and language arts worksheets. He's doing fine, but with the math he's really struggling. He's not retaining any of his math facts. And one day he'll do really well, and then the next day he has completely forgotten what 2 + 3 is, and he has to count on his fingers. And I encourage him, but what happens in the classroom setting when the rest of the class is so far ahead of him? How do you motivate him to stay? How do you encourage him to stay motivated to keep working?
Absolutely. What comes with this condition is high level of positives too. It comes with a lot of empathy, care, dedication, and drive. So if he might struggle in one area, he has to understand, throughout the day I did a lot of positive things too. If he could be redirected to something he did good in a different stance, not just versus academics, then he'll feel better about himself and learn that it's okay to make these mistakes and go on. Because otherwise he'll be so obsessed with everything he does that one problem and not being able to do 3 plus 2, everyone hates me, I did this wrong, nobody likes me, I don't want to talk to anyone. Oh, I helped this child during the day. I did this positive thing. And we start to look at things in a very different perspective because we're very, very hard on ourselves. Even if you're 7 years old, we are really hard on ourselves because we're that in tune with our emotions.
I have another question. Marco has a little bit of sensory processing things going on. So, in the classroom, like, how can we help him avoid freaking out over things that might not bother some other students?
What we need is some sort of sensory gaps because we get so enthralled and emotional. Like, I've worked as aides for children who have dyspraxia. If you give us a few minutes to just sort of break away from the classroom and then come back, we will cool down and rebuild again. Because otherwise it gets too intense too quick that I'm so emotional and so drawn to it that I'm going to melt down. It's going to happen. But if you give me 2 or 3 minutes to step aside and come back, I regrouped in my mind and body. Because if I keep going, if you had to go 18 hours straight, how would you guys feel? So if we have breaks in between, then we can regroup and get back to it. But if it's a constant, being this young and this intense, he's going to be so hard on himself. But he has these little breaks, then he can get back into the pace of things.
Well, this has been fantastic. I mean, I learned so much. I really appreciate that you taking the time to come to Chicago today. So,
I actually live in the suburb now, so I'm not too far away from you guys.
okay.
Believe it or not, with this condition, because of all the struggles I faced, nobody knew when I was his age what was really going on. This is becoming much more well-known now. That I felt like I was the only one, and the reality is 2 kids per class have this to one degree or another. And now I'm happily married, and I'm a stay-at-home dad running the foundation with twins. So I'm learning to multitask very quickly.
Good for you.
So I'm using my positives for my children and not caring that if I make some of these mistakes where as a young child would have impacted me, now I'm realizing it's okay.
Great. So if we had any other questions, is it possible we can send them to Christina and maybe we can get a few answers?
Absolutely. My pleasure is to help this child and to help you guys understand this. This is not an easy diagnosis and condition to get your head around. It's very inconsistent. You're going to have good and bad days. You're going to see similar strategies, but what you see at 7 is not what you're going to see at 10. It's going to change and evolve. Writing in the lines then becomes driving a car in the lines. It's going to mold and change. But if we work on the positives, get him happy and confident, that's the most important thing, because we're hanging on a thread of confidence and self-esteem and anxiety. So the more confidence we boost in this child, the happier he's going to be. And the fact that you understand that the inconsistencies, the good and bad days, and the slow processing is not something he can control. It's his neurological disorder. Then we'll all do good together.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Warren.
Thank you.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Christina.